All right. So let me tell you a little bit about FotoFest. FotoFest is an international photography nonprofit housed in the heart of Arts District Houston, with the longest running biennial of photography and new media art. FotoFest's mission is to serve as a platform for art and ideas, and Literacy Through Photography, the learning program's mission, is to help students achieve better communication skills using photography. So the past few years have marked significant growth in the learning program, especially with the digital age progressing. It began with a series of photography workshops in 1987 between Wendy Ewald, supported by FotoFest co-founders, Wendy Waitress and Fred Baldwin. In 1990, that's when FotoFest first integrated the learning program with Houston Independent School District and reached over 1,000 students. The core of the learning program is based in writing, literacy, and photography. And more recently, the LTP teaching artists use students' social media fluency as a tool for achieving increased literacy. We believe that building in creative practices early increases learning retention in writing communication and engagement. Okay, so let's move on to the core themes of our workshop. The first is about the self, where we will reflect on the sense of identity and point of view as artists, and we have opportunities to recognize and understand our emotions and how to express themselves creatively. The home unit explores the concept of home and the different ways home may be interpreted, what it means to us, how it changes over time. Okay, so somebody had mentioned that my audio is low, so we're fixing that right now.
Your microphone's on. Yeah, is it still on?
Mm-hmm. I'll probably just need to change.
Here, I'll bring you. Yeah.
Okay, how does this sound now?
This is a chat, so it's all the way up. So. Good. Okay.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for catching that early. Okay. So moving on to the home. The home unit in the literacy through photography curriculum explores the way home may be interpreted, what it means to us and how it changes over time. For instance, home could be a physical space, a feeling, the people or the relationships we have, and just those things that home is attributed to. So the next unit in the curriculum is about community. The community unit focuses on the ways and reasons people come together. Understanding these connections helps us identify how a community can impact our lives, choices, and values we may carry into the future. And finally, my favorite, the dreams unit, where space is created for us and students to roam free in their creativity and reimagining their futures. The creative process really comes to life in this unit as students understand their own uniqueness and place in the world. Now, the best part of the learning program is showcasing students' work. So at the end of every school year, we have something called photo finish. So when residencies are wrapping up, FotoFest celebrates student work in a professionalized exhibition that's open to the public. Having this time and space is crucial and important to the accessibility of the arts to all ages and all communities. We believe that students are artists, writers, and critics whose unique perspectives and worldviews deserve to be heard. With that being said, I invite you to join us in a live demonstration on the self unit of the Literacy Through Photography curriculum. And it will be led by our longtime teaching artist, Moe Penders. Mo, if you want to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please.
Hello. So my name is Moe Penders. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a non-binary artist from El Salvador. I mainly focus on photography and image making, and I've been teaching artists for LTP for about 6 years now. So to me, I really enjoy teaching with LTP because it's more about self-expression, and what we do as teaching artists is kind of break away from the mold of like teaching how teaching is done in schools, like in a not as rigid way, right? Like, so there's more room for kids to express themselves and explore different things, right? Like through the themes that Rose had mentioned. And the program is not so much about teaching photography in a technical aspect, although like, of course, kids do learn how to use cameras and learn basic things, but it's about, yeah, different ways of self-expression. So today we're going to be talking about self, and we're going to be talking about portraiture and also like self-portraiture. So we're going to go a little fast at the beginning to be able to get through, because there will be some participation from y'all. So I don't know if everyone has the Nearpod link open, because I would want everyone that's on here to open the link and be able to participate. Or should I send it on the chat? I'm not sure. I guess I'll send it. I'll send it on the chat.
Yeah, if you could send it in the chat.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay. So if you go on that link, I sent it on the chat, or you can also just go to nearpod.com, and you can put the code 2IENK. It shows up in different parts depending on if you're using a laptop or a cell phone. But if you just put in that code, it'll take you to the lesson we're gonna do. Or you can just click on the link, of course. And I can see here once people start joining, I'll be able to see how many people have joined, and then we can start. So as of now, I only have 2 people. I don't know how many people are logged into the class. Sorry about that, and let me see if I can send it again. Here you go. So everyone should be able to see it now. And the code that I mentioned before was 2IENK. Hi, Anne. So I have 3 people now. Okay, so I have 5 people on the Nearpod lesson right now. I think there's a couple missing. I'm not sure if anyone's having trouble accessing it still. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and y'all can see what the screen is shared, so you can also follow along, but you won't be able to participate on the lesson. So this is gonna be kind of an example of what we do in the classrooms when we get to use Nearpod with the students. This is more than we usually do, but yeah, for today, we're gonna be discussing the elements of a portrait, including facial expressions, vantage point, body posture, clothing, and the background, for instance, when you're creating a portrait or a self-portrait. And we're also gonna learn the different approaches to creating a self-portrait and practice expressing aspects of identity via writing and photography. So one of the first things we always do in LTP is we practice a lot of brain drains. So brain drains are kind of like the idea of just like drain whatever's in your brain and put it on paper. It can be kind of like a stream of consciousness. Usually like a brain drain is supposed to be a stream of consciousness, right? So you just have the students write whatever's on their mind for 5 to 10 minutes, you determine that. Or sometimes we also offer prompts, right? Like, so with all our lessons, there's always different examples of prompts, or you can create your own prompts. So the one I'm gonna have you all do is the one I always do with my first lesson whenever I meet students for the first time. It's trying to more engage and get to know people a little more. So you can go ahead and start, and you have 5 minutes to write. So I'll be quiet for 5 minutes, or I'll be around for you to ask questions. So there's about a minute and a half left. I'm not sure if y'all are, doesn't seem like anyone's typing, but I'm not sure. Uh, but yeah, this is usually like an exercise we do, trying to get to know more about the students, right? So sharing, yeah, like what, I don't know, for instance, never mind. I'll let y'all write and then I'll talk. Okay, so time's up. Let me see. I see Anne shared her or did her assignment. So I'm gonna read it out loud if that's okay. It says, wait, let me see. Okay, this type of food brings me back to the village I am from. The butcher shop my great grandfather and then great uncle used to run, and my mother. It's boudin, I'm assuming, the red blood type, or boudin, the red blood type that I do not think we find in Houston. I am from southern France, and cooked apples. I love the smell that rises in the kitchen as my mom fries the boudin and apples. The texture of both melting together in my mouth, the salty, peppery, and sweet. It brings a lot of memories of family. So see, like, for instance, Anne just shared that, and we found out a lot about her family, right? And where she's from, and what memories she has from her childhood, right? So I love doing this exercise with the students because it always brings out more, like, in ways it brings out about our family and our culture, which is kind of like the connections that we're also making, right, with the themes that we work with LTP. And then LTP shared, recently my neighbor knew of a hard experience I had, so she gratefully prepared me some Indian dishes as she saw I was not leaving the house and most likely eating. There were spices, the texture was smooth, it was unlike anything I have eaten before. Afterwards, she would come over regularly and just became an organic friendship. I felt connected again, happy and full. So it's also like the importance of like nurturing, that food nurtures, and the connections that we can make through food. So it's always, I always enjoy doing this for my first brain drain. And like I said, we always do this with LTP. Like we always start the class with a brain drain just to get our thoughts going. So moving on, since y'all know we're going to be talking about portraits. So a portrait is an image of a person or group of people that typically depicts aspects of their personality and physical likeness. So some of the elements of a portrait are clothing, props, facial expression, background, body posture, and perspective, right? Like, so all those things are important. And they do a lot to what you're trying to create in the portrait that you're trying to create, right? Like, so for instance, right now, in a way, this is a portrait, right? Like the way I'm being presented to you right now, you can see my environment. I'm kind of choosing what you can kind of see some of the art on the wall, some things I have hanging here. So like this is being curated. So in the same way, right, like we curate portraits and what we want to include and for people to see. Like some things can be distractions, or some things can add to the information or the message that we want to share. So for instance, this portrait by Marcia Michael, who is from the UK. So in this portrait, like for instance, I start looking at everything. I see the carpet, the way the child is dressed, what's behind the child. It looks like a frame or a mirror or something, like the back of a frame or a mirror, and some curtains. And it's interesting because when I see this image, for some reason, I don't know why, but I kind of relate it to Europe, to like current day living in Europe right now. Maybe it's just like what I see on the wall and the carpet, like that information. So we choose those, like, or we get information, right? The context from the portraits that we create. So all those elements are always important when we're creating this. So this is something that you can do with the students if you're looking at images. Take a moment to list out the elements of a portrait you see in the image, right? So the facial expression, the background, body posture, clothing, props, perspective, right? Like, so we saw in the previous photo, the child didn't seem extremely enthusiastic or about being in the photo, or just like very like serious tone for it. And it's also like thinking about that, right? In portraiture, we always assume that when we're taking a portrait, like people have to smile or something, and questioning what should be included in a portrait. Like, is there a right or wrong? But also I was going to say at the beginning of this class or workshop, sorry, that there aren't any wrong answers. Well, maybe some, but the majority not. So that's a question that I'm posing to y'all, right? Like self-portraits. What do you think needs to be included in a photograph to be a self-portrait, right? To make it a self-portrait. So you can all participate on this. So it'll be kind of like a pin board. So everyone can just throw out our ideas, like just little thoughts of like what you think a self-portrait is, or what makes a self-portrait. Anyone on the Nearpod? Okay, so we got some in. So Heather says it doesn't have to include a face. Yay, you're right. A body part of the photographer, or anything that might represent who the photographer is. Thank you, Anne. Erica says self. To that is, what is self? What do you consider to be self? And an image that represents an aspect of who you are can be your face, your body, or more abstract. And then LTP said a person, maybe clothing and tools, right? So yeah, it's right. Of course, like you don't have to see someone's face. It can just be a body part, or an assignment that I always do with my students as well is have them pick, for instance, an object that they really like, right? That describes them in some way, and create some sort of like faceless self-portrait, right? So, but using an object. So yes, thank you everyone for participating. So then the next example I had is this photograph by Jamie Robertson called Self-Portrait with Hair Furrowed Out. And it's part of a series that she created called Making Reference. So Jamie is a Houston photographer, and this specific project called Making Reference, I'm going to just read a little excerpt from the statement, and it says, is an ongoing series of self-portraits influenced by representations of Black women in art history and popular culture. So the body of work or this series of course is like broader than what I just read, and the statement is longer as well. But she is talking about like her own ancestry, right? Like and the ancestry of Black people and how they were represented through art, right? Like by like as colonized bodies, right? And she uses herself to create these self-portraits, and they are about Jamie, but they're not about Jamie at the same time, right? Like, so it is about her and let's say her people, but it's not necessarily like Jamie saying like this is necessarily me, but it is at the same time. It's like an inter connection, right? Like of creating this body of work or a way of creating self-portraits as well. So there's different ways in which we create self-portraits, not just like necessarily like me telling you I'm Mo and this is exactly me, but like I can use my body as well to tell you different stories. Let me just check the chat real quick. Yes. Okay, so moving on. Something else that we do with our students is we learn to read images. So that is to help us with visual literacy, right? Or that's like the visual, well, no, that's not the whole part of it, but yes, part of it. Hold on. The chat says, for which group age do you introduce the aspects of self-portrait to send a wider message, upper middle school or only in high school? I do self-portraits with little kids and all ages really. Cause from young little kids, I start talking to them about like even things that they like, right? Like and what, or sometimes I think it's in the lesson about community and probably home too, right? That talks a lot about culture and how that connects to our identity or like our personality. The self-portrait for a wider message like Jamie, more than about herself, symbolism. Oh, I guess I've shown Jamie's work to also, that I remember for sure, I've shown it to third graders and had conversations with them about it. Maybe not. Yes. I mean, yeah, I've told them about like that a self-portrait doesn't necessarily have to be a face. It's still the person, right? Like talking about aspects of their identity. So I don't think it's yeah, it just depends on how you present things, that the concept can still be like they're really great at understanding everything. And then yeah, they can talk about like their own things. So reading images, we do a 4-step process. So this is in our curriculum, this specific page. So the first step when you're reading an image is observation. So right, like list the most basic things that you see in a photograph. So for instance, there's some sample questions on here. It says, what do you see in the background and surroundings? What type of photograph? Is it a portrait, landscape, or still life? From what vantage point did the photographer take this photo? So yeah, like something I tell the kids is just kind of like, or sorry, the students is just like, okay, is it in color? Is it in black and white? Yeah, are there people in the photo? Is it a landscape? So we just like try to make a list of like the most basic things, right? Like even if it's obvious, like tell me the most obvious things that you see. Sorry, I'm reading. Okay, sorry. The chat. So questions is the second part of reading photographs. So once you've listed all the basic things that you see in a photograph, is you can ask questions. So kind of like, oh, why is that object there, right? Like why did they leave the frame, the back of the frame in that portrait of that we saw earlier, right? And with the child. Why did the artist choose to leave that there? Kind of like maybe giving us hints of like where they are. Then after you ask questions, you do personal connections, right? So try to find like anything that you might understand with your own life or your own perceptions, right? Like, or maybe how it is different to your experience. And then the fourth step is interpretation, right? So by now we are trying to understand what the artist is trying to tell us, right? Like, why did they take this photograph? We have like a general context of maybe where it was taken or understanding. So those are like the steps that we take to try to understand the image, based like from the most basic, then asking questions, making personal connections, and then trying to interpret the image, which is not always going to be the right thing. I mean, you're going to interpret it right. Like sometimes you need more context, but it also like kind of speaks to art, right? Like, and how we perceive things. And I think that a lot of art, once it's viewed, we can put a lot of our own baggage onto it rather than just seeing exactly what the artist is saying. So, okay. So we're gonna do that right now, right? Take a few minutes and study this image by photographer Imogen Cunningham. So this image is titled The Unmade Bed. So I'm gonna move it to the next slide so you can see it larger. And so take a few seconds to look at it and tell me what you see and what you think. So first step, list the most basic things, right? Like observations. Is it in black and white? Is it in color? What is it? Wait, no, that's questions. That's a second. So then the second step is ask questions, right? Like, so maybe some of the questions that I would ask are, why is she taking a photo of her unmade bed? I always try to close the door in my bedroom if anyone's coming over and my bed is unmade. And what are the clips, right? Like, that are on the bed. Then the third step is making a personal connection. So I kind of made a personal connection to my bed. I don't put stuff in my hair, so I don't know what those clips are for. The ignorance, sorry. And then the last step would be make an interpretation. So wait, let me skip to the next slide to see. I can't remember right now. Okay, never mind. So I'm actually going to tell you about this image. So I can't remember for sure, but I think it was Ansel Adams, who was a professor, Ansel Adams was also like a very, very famous photographer. And he had an assignment to, like that same assignment of having his students take a self-portrait, but not include their face or their body in it. And so then he invited, maybe it wasn't Ansel Adams. I can't remember. Or maybe it was Edward Weston. I can't remember who it was, but it was one of those people. And so he invited Imogen Cunningham to do that assignment, right? Like, and she took this photograph, right? So it's a self-portrait in a very kind of like personal or intimate setting, right? Like, no, like that was her waking up in the morning. That was kind of like her ritual. She would wake up in the morning, take out the things out of her hair, and I guess make her bed afterwards. So for her, like, she created this as a self-portrait. But that's kind of like, I'm giving you the context of the history of this photograph. But yes, this is where this photograph comes from. And it's still a self-portrait, right? Like, regardless, like there's no shadow, there's no person. There's like hints that it is about a specific person, and that is her bed, right? Like something that is very personal, or can be very personal to us. So a self-portrait is a way for artists to reflect on their identity, right? Like, so we think about the things that make us us. And for this, Rose, can you click through so we can see these images, please? These are all self-portraits by different artists. And so, yeah, at the bottom, it has the image list. So the first artist is Omar Victor Diop. sorry, yeah, Omar Victor Diop. And he did this whole series with historic figures. He was here. Had his work up at the Rice Media Center in 2020, I think. It's really awesome work. Also Cindy Sherman. So some are contemporary photographers and some are like older photographers. I mean, Cindy Sherman still like, but then Genevieve, Gaynard, I can't remember how you pronounce her name. She also had work at HCP maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Vivian Meyer did a lot of self-portraits, but someone found suitcases with all her film and started processing it. And so she was never recognized or shown during her time. And I think she was a nanny. And so she would just like take tons and tons of photographs, but was never known then. Then there is Ming Smith and Zanel Muhali, which is actually a very well-known non-binary artist. And you can see their work at the MFA. There's a giant portrait of their work, which is really beautiful to see in one of the new buildings. And then Tiffany Smith, and the last person is Samuel Foso, who was also in the FotoFest biennial in 2020, I believe, and has really great photographs as well. Wow, I just did that all by, I remembered those. Wow, Mo. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so identity circle. So right now we're gonna start thinking more about how to create our own self-portraits, or how we can go about like working with our students in creating self-portraits. So one easy exercise that you can do is an identity circle. So it's all divided in the things that, and you can fill in those each pie chart. So for instance, it includes age, gender, culture, religion, language, hobbies, family history, and hometown. So I'm gonna have all of you participate so you can create your drawing and write in. Yes, and Emily says on the chat that it can be other parts of your identity as well. Those are suggestions. So yeah, it can be things that you choose. It doesn't necessarily have to be the ones we said. So y'all can go ahead and start drawing. And also, if you ever use Nearpod with your students, this is to give you a hint that it might. Oh no, it just lets you type. Okay, never mind. Because if you have to draw, it's really difficult. I thought everyone was going to draw their pie chart. I think if anyone's having trouble drawing, I think you can do a text box. Like you can see though on the shared screen, Rose is using a text box. So if that's easier for everyone, you can do that. Okay, so I'm only gonna give y'all 3 more minutes for this, and then we gotta move on because running out of time. Okay, so everyone should whoever's been participating should share it so we can see them. Let me see. So we can see Rose created this one. So she's Peruvian, friends, time, family, adventure, and art. Then Heather did artist, friend, creator, and dreamer. Then and you went very into detail. It's okay if you wrote, you didn't have to draw. It's okay, Anne. So you said you're multicultural, French, Chinese, born in Morocco, and you love working on different cultures. Spiritual, not to be boring, but this is photography, outdoors, sports, traveling cultures, learning about cultures. So yeah, Anne went into a lot of detail. Oh, I can't see. Oh, wait, this is why. Sorry. Now you can see it. So I'm sharing Anne's. Let me see. And then let me share Emily's. Queer, educator, manager, Houstonian, cat lover, artist, DJ, musician, multiracial, daughter. So yeah, everyone is like, you're all creating, like thinking about the things that you want to share, right? And so that's right? Like that's what you can do with your students as well. Like have them share what they think makes them who they are. So wow, like we got here on time. So the activity that I want us to participate in today is create a photograph, also like a faceless, or well, no, it can be your face actually. So I'm gonna read first and then explain more. So it says, pick one thing about yourself. It can be a body part, something from your identity circle, a skill, etc. Right? Once you have selected this, think about the details and plan your image using the elements of a portrait. Create your self-portrait keeping these elements in mind. So you can email your self-portrait to Emily before our workshop ends, and we can share them here. So just to do a quick recap of the elements of a portrait, so facial expression, background, body posture, clothing, props, and perspective. You don't have to include all these things, but you can have these things in mind, right, when you're creating your self-portrait. And so what we can do to get started is, so I told you at the beginning, right, like select something about yourself, right? So it can be a body part, or it can be something that you do. For instance, sometimes, I don't know, you could be a painter or something, and that can help you pick, let's say, your body part or the thing, right? Like, so you use your hand for painting. And so like so what we're gonna do on Nearpod first is describe the self-portrait you created here before you created. What did you choose to focus on and why? And how does your self-portrait represent you? So you can just write like what you're gonna pick and kind of make a plan. You can even, well, not on here, not on this Nearpod, but sometimes you can draw, like sometimes that will like just get a piece of paper and choose where you want to put things in your composition, right? And so that's what I want y'all to do right now, right? Like, so think about what you want to pick, why you want to pick it, and describe it in detail. So kind of like how we did the reading the photograph. So just describe the most basic things, right? Like, I don't know, I want to see my fingers and doing this, right? Like I play the trumpet, so I want to blah 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 to show the viewer this, right? Like this is part of who I am. This like, and it's a very maybe small detail to this like more richer thing. So you can all go ahead and do that right now on Nearpod. And as soon as you're ready, you can, or just go ahead and create your self-portrait. So we have till the workshop ends at 6:30. So I would suggest maybe being done by 6:15 or 6:20, and try to send those photographs to Emily's email. Maybe Emily, you can put your email in the chat. I don't know if you already did. And yeah, for now, everyone can just go ahead and create their self-portrait. And I'll be here for questions, comments, and concerns. So y'all can start with a Nearpod. Or do you want me to give you another example? Yes, okay. So for instance, one time I read this, or someone showed me this book that they created with students, and what they had to do was write a poem, like same thing, right? Like pick a body part and write a poem about this. So there was this child that picked their hair, right? Like, and then in the poem it said, "Oh, my hair is black and wavy, and it reminds me of my mother and my ancestors, right? And where they come from." And she described her hair and why she liked it, and and yeah, and then there were like references to like her own ancestry or where they came from and everything. So it's kind of like connected in everything that's happened in this lesson too, right? Like even if you think about the tell me about, pick a food or like your favorite food or something and tell me a story about it, it's more about like thinking of a one little detail and how that detail can have like a broader conversation. So that's the example. I'm like disperse. Okay, so I think that there's 4 photos or 3 photos. How many photos? Yeah, there's 3 photos so far. So I know that there's one more person participating or participated in the writing. So just put it in the chat or something so we know. Okay, so yeah, take your time to do it. I just wanted to make sure if someone else was going to send one. So that's no worries, no rush. Okay, cool. So all the photos I think have now been sent. So Emily, I think Heather sent you a photo so we can then look at them. So first I'm gonna share the written part that y'all did. And then we can look at the photos that were created. So these some, let's see, the first one is by Rose. It's going to say literacy through photography. So it says the photo shows a white wall with 2 large prints on it. There's a chair in between the prints, a wooden chair. There is another hallway in the back full of boxes and a wagon. The girl in the photograph is looking at the things that are not in the frame, like there are many things to do. I focused on the thinking position, like the sculpture, lost in thought. My leg is extended to show my height, even though I am sitting. Hold on, let me just read the chat. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay, there you go. Y'all got it. Okay, so on Zoom, you can see the image that was just the writing that I just read. So that image is by Rose. So she chose to do a self-portrait and include your face and everything. So then the next one, let's see. Do you have Heather's image yet? Wait, I'm gonna skip Heather for a second, and just in case. And so I'm gonna share what Anne wrote. So Anne says about a self-portrait I did when I came back to Houston after 8 years overseas, not doing one right now. This was 5 years ago. So she says, this is a mural next to my house, and I knew I wanted it as a background just because it said Houston, and I felt grounded again now that I was back. I could build a home and look for a job that I would love. I always wear my red glasses. My students used to tell me to use them for self-portraits, and my Doc Martens and crazy hair. That's me in a hole. And so can you share that image, please? There you go. That's cool. So yeah, it's kind of like also giving us a geographic location, right? Like giving us context as to where this photograph is being taken and showing us the person too. So that was Anne Huang's photo. And so the next one, Emily said, my image is of my bookshelf. There are some items that are particularly important to me, including my incense, because I love for thin. What do you love, Emily? What did it say?
I didn't finish, so you can just move to the next one and I'll write it.
Oh,
in the
sorry,
chat.
sorry. Okay, so you can see the image. Wait, no, show Emily's image.
Yeah.
Oh, you're saying to move to the next person. I think that we only have you and Heather.
That's fine. You can just show it. Can I talk about it? I'll just say it.
Yes, you can.
I was just saying it's the top of my shelf, which has some important items to me, including my incense, because I like for things to my room to smell good. And then you can see my hair products stacked behind, and some of my plants. And then in the mirror and the little frame is well, in the mirror you can see my music studio that's in my room, and the frame is of my grandfather's band, or like a, I guess band is the best word to put it, which is a big influence on my music. So
Yeah, so for instance, like that's great, right? Like, because we can't see a person, like a physical face or anything, but there were so many things that we learned, or we can tell also about this image, that you create music. I think that your hair products are really important too, um, and also the connection to your music and that of your grandfather, right? And also where your family comes from, like in relation to the music. So I think that that's it, it's a like there's a lot going on in this image too, right? Like the references from the mirror and how you use that. So it's really cool. And then the last one that we're gonna share is gonna be Heather. So Heather, it says an open notebook with empty pages lays on a table. A dried flower hidden in the binding, lit by a singular light source, represents how difficult it is to share anything personal about myself. And now we're all talking about sharing all the personal things. Well, so there's Heather's image on the screen, as described. Although it's funny because I imagined it different, like in the description. But it's really nice to see your image, and also like I think that in this specific image there's also like something more poetic um in the way that Heather created this image. So it's interesting to see how all four of you created like the different self-portraits. I think it was really fun to see how everyone went about it and did what they did, right? Like how a self-portrait or a portrait can be so broad in the ways of creating it. So yeah. Does anyone have questions? Thank you, Heather. No questions? Everyone knows all the things. Okay. Wait, hold on. Let me go back to the Nearpod. And so I'm just gonna show. Oh, can you share? Oh, it is shared. Sorry, my bad. So we have 6 methods for creating self-portraits. So you can have someone else take a photo under your instructions. So you're telling them what to do, but they just like press the button. You can hold the camera yourself to take the photo. You can use the mirror or other reflective surfaces to take the photo. And it suggests to turn off the flash so that way it doesn't overexpose, for instance, the mirror. Prop the camera on a surface and use the timer function after you set up the shot. So you can go and like set it on a table and set up your scenery and know where you're gonna stand. So that's something that I used to do actually when I was in college, I used to take all these like long exposures, like self-portraits, and they were long exposures. So I'd go out at night, I'd pick my little landscape or whatever where I was going to take the photo, and then I'd like put it in view, and I'd always have a friend with me, and I'd have him go stand so I could focus, just to stand where I was going to stand, and then I'd focus on him, and then I'd like switch, and then he'd press the button, and I'd stand in for the photo. And another one is take a photo of your shadow, and also turn off your flash for that one. And don't move if you're doing that, or a long exposure. Or if you want it shaky, you can also move. So yes, you can move in a long exposure. Photograph objects that mean something to you or reveal something about you. So it's interesting, like within these, like we didn't mention these before, but I think that all of y'all's examples of what you just did right now are a different example of this, right? Like I'm not sure, Rose, if someone helped you take the photo, like if someone took it or if you propped it and did the timer. But
Yeah, I had somebody help me. I needed
okay. Yeah, so for instance, yeah, you gave instruction on, I'm assuming like the vantage point or something, like where you wanted the image taken from. So it was like low, looking up, and what was included. Then for instance, Heather, you selected using an object, right? Like about sharing yourself. Also Emily, you used the mirror, right? Like in reflective surfaces to, and objects as well, like telling us about who you are. And you also, I'm not sure if you did a timer or someone took that photo of you. Well, regardless, yeah, you did a tripod and a timer, right? Yeah, so every single one of you went about it a different way, right? There was a self timer, someone helped, reflective surfaces, and objects, right? So it was really cool to see how everyone did something different. So yeah, do you have any questions? It says, please fill out our survey. It's in the chat. They just sent a Google form, so you can fill out the survey. And yeah, you can visit LTP's website is under photofest.org, and you can go to the learning program. You can email ltp@photofest.org, and you can also follow us on Instagram. It's at photofestltp, so you can keep up with us. I'm not sure, Heather, have we met? I think I've met everyone else, but I'm not sure if we've met. Let's see. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed it. And yeah, you can do this with your students as well. I'm not sure. Yeah, that's why I was asking. So I'm not sure if you're a teaching artist or not, but yeah, like, I mean, and this can be with anyone of any ages, I think.